Easy 3DI, Chapter 7, Settings. The objectives of this session will be to navigate the settings screen to configure the following: Environment tab, View tab, Measurement Annotation tab, Simulation tab, Console tab, Report tab, and DICOM tab. We'll then go down to our settings. Under the settings window, we have our sections as indicated along the left and the tabs for each section along the top. Under environment, we'll start there. For the general, English will be our language for that. Calibri is a font that I've chosen here, which can then change on a personal basis. The teeth numbering for US needs to be set to universal, FDI be Canada and elsewhere. And then also, as far as our dosage measurement, we'll keep that the same. And then for saving our projects, auto will save it without giving you a project name option. Manual save will give you an option to specify a project name. Under the capture image, you can either save it manually, do an auto save, and also specify to a PAC system like for a hospital setting. The database linkage won't be doing anything here as far as configuration here. That will be done primarily through IT and tech support. And then as far as the linkage here, when you want to be able to set up a linkage here as far as for email, or in this case here for third-party software program, we can specify, let's say 3DDX, and then specify the directory where the executable would be for that particular module. We can also have linkage for others in the toolbar here, like in this case here, a dialog box for creating movies, and then the path for doing that as well. Under the linkage and email, we also have the ability to specify the email account that we use. In this case here, putting our email address, our Gmail server address, our email password, the port number, which is 587, our display name, and then under security, the TLS security level. We can also click on the test icon to verify that the account is configured properly. When you're prompted, that means the email is configured properly. And then from there, going to your clinic information. In this case here, I put in Vatech America here, identifying information I want to print out on my reports. In the bottom right hand side, I can also enter in a logo, or in this case here, where I scanned in a business card to add that to my reports. Moving on here down to View, under the General tab, we then have the ability to change how we want to be able to navigate that 3D reconstruction down there in the bottom right hand corner. This can also be dependent on the video graphics card capabilities to be able to maneuver that image successfully. Like in this case here, I went to highest speed in the case that I don't have enough video memory, but the image will look somewhat jagged as you rotate the image around. When I go back into my settings here again and go back over to View here again, and we'll go over here and change it to regular speed, we can also then put in high quality. But this also will require greater system resources to be able to maneuver, but you will not have that jagged effect as you are then rotating the image around that would require it to be reconstructed once you are done moving it. Under the settings tab here again, we'll go ahead and continue under the View tab here. And then underneath the guide type, we can also specify whether we want to see the skull as we see there. We can specify what DICOM tag we want to use, which will be defaulted to DICOM tag of the scan itself, and then the windowing just specific to that DICOM tag itself. And then down below, if you want to add a grid to your scan here, the grid line, grid distance, and spacing. Under the 3D view, we also have the ability to decide how much anatomy we want to see at any given time. We can set it to a 100% default zoom, so it will then fill in the entire window there. We also have the ability where we can adjust as far as the opacity in our view, and what we can also then do is use various windowing effects to apply that to our scan. But most importantly, what we have the ability to do then under the viewing section here, under the 3D, is being able to set a default then by a particular device. So clicking on default setting here, when I do that, it allows me then to change whatever my default is. In this case here, it happens to be for a PAX Duo 3D system, and I can then change these windowing or virtual rendering effects for this particular device itself. So I can adjust my opacity, I can adjust my density range, I can adjust my color range and so forth. And once I've made all my adjustments to my scan itself, what I'll have the ability to do then is save those changes. So I can change my coloring here again, I can change my density range here and apply that going up and down. And then once I've defined my color range, my density range, and my opacity range, I can then save that to my Pax Duo 3D by clicking on Save there in the bottom right hand corner. And then once I've done that, I can click on Close to close it out and then save that new opacity preset for this particular device. Going back under Settings here again, we'll continue under the View section here and then go beyond the 3D part here and go over to the 2D viewer. So the 2D viewer on the NPR view, we can change the thickness here, which is currently set to 1 millimeter. Our default interval here is also set to 1 millimeter. The default zoom is set to 1 millimeter or 100% to fill in the window. And we also have the ability to determine the intervals in terms of doing multiple slice views, which is currently set to a default of 1 millimeter as well. In the panorama view, I set my from the sectional window. What I'll do then is right click in the scout view in the bottom left hand corner and then go down to our thickness where I have it currently set to 10 millimeters, essentially going from cortical plate to cortical plate there. You can also right click and make it 1 millimeter on a per patient basis as well. Going back to the settings here again, we'll then click on view again along the left hand side of the screen and then click on the navigator tab there again. And then underneath there we have the ability to set then for our 3D pan view, which will then set up a box there which is either 50 millimeters by 50 millimeters here, or if I want to make it maybe 70 millimeters wide, I can do that as well. And to demonstrate that, I'll click on OK and then go over to the 3D pan, and you now see the box is now 70 millimeters wide by 50 millimeters in height. Going back over to settings here again, we'll click on the view tab, click on the navigator as well, and then in the bottom portion of the window we can then set our TMJ view as far as our thickness and intervals there as well. Going down to the measurement and annotations, we can customize the angle line color. We can also customize the length line color as well as the profile or density line color as well. Once we've adjusted our colors, like in this case here, maybe bright yellow, clicking on OK there at the bottom and then clicking on OK out of our settings window, we can then apply these options that we've created here. So we'll first start with the option here under measurement. Go to our angle, left click again, and then draw our third point, which then give us and verify that we have a blue angle line. Going over to our measurement icon, we'll then measure, let's say, going across the ridge here, which is a yellow line. And then in our third option there, go to our profile or density here, which is then a red line. So again, blue for our angle, red for density, and then yellow for our measurement. Going back to our settings here again, going down to measurement and annotations here, verify the colors that we've chosen there from the settings and customize as we wish to. And then from there we click on the Annotations tab. From here we can specify a line color for free draw. We can also specify the thickness of that line. If you want to add a text box and so on, we can specify the font size, and if we want to add then as far as other information on there for a pointer and so on, we can then specify our color and size to that as well. So from here we'll go down to the option here, going past our measurement here and then clicking on our pointer here, we can specify our line color, which in this case here the yellow line we added on there. We can click on the eraser to erase that line there again if we wish to, and change the line color there as well on the fly or on a per patient basis, and also click on the camera to grab a snapshot of that anatomy with your annotations on there. Going back to settings here again, so under the annotations part we can also specify a memo as far as the preferences, font size, font color, as well as a font background. So we'll click in the area where we put on a text, type in our text itself, and once we've entered our text, we can also then right click on that text if you want to change it on the fly. In this case here, going to property, we can change our font size, we can change our font color, let's say in this case here to red, and then also then apply that if we want to. Right click again, go to property here, and then change our background color if we want to. In this case here, we can make that perhaps a pale yellow. Click on OK to apply it. When you move the box, then you'll see how the applied changes will take effect. Going back to the settings here again, we'll now go down to simulation here. And under the first tab for general, we can then specify our implant placement for auto or manual. When you click on auto, when you have your implant selected, let's say you choose your color. In this case here, we have it currently set to green. You can choose a color there from the palette there. And once you've chosen your color, then choose the tooth number itself from the tooth chart up above. And when you do that, it automatically drops the implant in place based on where the axial lines are placed. I'm going to right click to delete it and go back to our settings here again, and then from here under simulation I'm going to change it from auto to manual. Moving it to manual, then place the implant where you left click your mouse instead of where the axis lines are located. So again, click on our implant, tooth number, specify a crown if we want to do that, and then left click where we want to drop the implant. So left click, orient it, and then place it in place there. Manual seems to be a better way to do that rather than doing the auto. Going back into our settings here again, go down to simulation here. Now we specify our default color for our implant as well as default color for our crown. Green is the default. Some people prefer using black or using red. So in this case here, I can make that red if I want to. And then when I go to add my implant in there, again, you can see my default color selected there. And I can also still change it on a per implant basis if I choose. Going back into settings here again, continue under our simulation here, where we have our crown option here. Yellow may be the one that's defaulted within the system. I prefer using white as far as my default crown color. And see how the default color is reflected there in the implant placement window. The Simulation General tab is where you would go then to set your collision detection here, which is currently set to a 2 mm minimum distance to the canal as well as other virtual implants. And the canal is also set to a 2 mm and default red color. We'll place our canal in here as an example here, placing our landmarks roughly 5 mm apart from one another, going from the mental foramen to the posterior of our arch. When we're done, we can then double click, and if we wish to, we can also then right click on the canal to then change either the color or the diameter. We'll also then place our virtual implant here as well. In this case here, we'll choose tooth number 19 here, choose our crown, click on OK, left click to drop it in place, and the red shaded area identifies the fact that the implant is too close to the superior border of our nerve. We'll reduce the length of our implant to see whether that will then accommodate the implant in that site, and then left click to elevate it until the apical end of the implant is beyond the 2 mm distance of the superior border of our nerve. Under the Simulation tab, and then going over to the preset implant, is where we can set a specific manufacturer for each tooth in our dentition. We can then go on to modify, where we can then search for the particular manufacturer, model type, and so forth, and change that for each of the 28 teeth indicated in the tooth chart here. It takes about 5 minutes to set it up, but will then save time when you do a vertical dimension, right click, and then you can place an implant immediately. So by setting your default here, once I've chosen a tooth number, when I see the drop down under company, it will then default to BioHorizon or whatever company I've chosen as my default. Going back into settings here again, go down to simulation, and then going over to bone density. This is a good tutorial here to use for doctors to identify the density range using the Hounsfield range as a reference. D1 bone being 1200 and higher, D2 bone being 800 and higher, and so forth, and use this as a scale to identify the density for each of these categories. The colors can be changed as you wish, and the same thing for airway. There are default colors that are assigned there, red being the most restrictive. You have a minimum range that you can set and so forth. So when you use the airway module, the sagittal screen will maximize, and you can place your landmark at the base of the palate as well as to the epiglottis. It'll then calculate it, and then from there, most cases using the 3D rendering down the bottom right hand corner to visualize the airway space. You can use the clipping tool here, looking from the left hand side, and clip away, perhaps getting to the midline, and then changing it to soft tissue. And then right clicking on it to go to your plane to go to the most restrictive area of your airway. So from the console tab, we also have the ability to set a pointer there as well in terms of our size as well as the pointer color. To test it, we'll click on OK here, go to our console tab, click on the pointer icon there in the toolbar, and then from there we can use it basically as a pencil to draw around our virtual implant in this case here, and then to identify where we're looking to do a sinus lift in that region using the consultation video itself. Moving on to the report settings, we have a number of different options that we can do under the General tab, including the font type, the font size, the line color around our box for our text, the font color, currently set to default of black. We can change it to red. We can also set a default background color as well as a border color as well. For the image box, we also have the option to choose a line type similar to that perhaps of our text box. We can set a background color, a boundary color. In this case here, making it the same as our text box, as well as adding a grid on there as well. Clicking on OK to set it, going over to our report section here, we can then choose our template, in this case here, reflecting the changes we made here with the yellow boundary on there, as well as the font that we've chosen and so forth, in this case here being a red color font. We can also right click on the fly to change our font size, font color, background color, and boundary color here as well. Going back over to our settings here again, going down to report, moving over to the preset commands is where we can basically set up commands that will then allow us to essentially create a narrative report where we can add a title, specify the text that we want to add then on a recurring basis when doing our reports, selecting OK to save that comment, and if we wish to, we can also change the name of it or add to it. Click on OK to save it, and then click on OK again, and then under the text box itself, when we right click on there, we have the ability then where we can pull up our commands here and choose from the list down below, in this case here the very last one, and then add that text automatically. Going back to our settings here again, under the report section, preset commands we discussed, and then moving on to paper, quite simply being able to choose your paper type and then setting your margins, the top, the sides, as well as the bottom. In summary, you should be able to navigate the settings screen to configure the following: Environment tab, View tab, Measurement Annotation tab, Simulation tab, Console tab, Report tab, as well as DICOM tab.